21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.
So you've spoken at numerous events about Lyme disease and women's entrepreneurship. What have been some of the most important life lessons you've learned from these experiences?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, great.
Nice,
question.
easy, quick, short question.
Yeah, it's definitely big question. So, from the Lyme disease standpoint, so my own personal story was with Lyme disease where I was super sick. I was so sick to the point where I was largely disabled some days, meaning I had to be carried. I was having memory loss. Forget where I lived, that sort of thing. So I was hugely in survival mode. So one of the biggest things I'd say from a learning perspective of what I got out of Lyme disease and my own journey with that, as well as the thousands of people that I've worked with, really comes down to the innate, amazing ability of the human body to heal when we actually do the investigative work to figure out the symbols or the signals that the body is really sending us. And so that was probably the personal belief that I got the most out of my own Lyme journey. And then with the business coaching thing, when I graduated from holistic medical school. I have a doctorate as a naturopathic doctor. I also have a second doctorate in Chinese medicine. And so that's acupuncture, that sort of thing, right? And so a lot of people, when I talk about business coaching and my world in that and the work I've done in that, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it must have been easy to get your business up and going. You're a doctor, right? No, not when you're a holistic doctor in the United States. Basically, the biggest thing with that is I had $500,000 of medical school debt. Nobody, when you do naturopathic medicine in the States, there's not a lot of job opportunities. You have to be an entrepreneur. So it was my rice and bean year is what I call it, where I had debt collectors calling me every day. I was living on basically $25 of expendable income for food every week, which hence the rice and beans. And so the biggest lesson I really learned in that was really beginning to push the way, it's needed to get stuff off the ground and get businesses off the ground, but also how to do that in as much of a stress-less way as possible. And that's really where I developed the concept of pleasure in business and really tuning into the pleasure centers, because that lowers, when we tune into pleasure, we have less stress, we have better hormonal balance, we have better health, which comes back into what we can put into business. So that's kind of a big question and as short of answer, I guess, as I can give you in that regard.
I just wanted to ask you regarding that specific survival mode. A lot of entrepreneurs are in survival mode because of a lot of different circumstances, and they are being freezed in a moment. I understand it's a very broad question again, but few examples of few first steps to start going out from that zone, red zone.
Yeah, it's such a great question. And this is where I feel like as a business coach and that work I do, having the background in medicine, really, it's amazing how much business and medicine actually go together. Right? Because this stress response you're talking about, this fear, that sort of thing, one of the things that's happening is when we go into these types of responses, because of, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed, there's so much to do, and we have to, it is like a survival type of thing, right? So our cortisol goes up, our adrenaline goes up. And then what you're talking about in this, this fear, this freeze, that's oftentimes associated with a emotional dysregulation, oftentimes even involving our amygdala, our fear center. And so the mind often goes into this freeze or this overwhelmed type of state because we're thinking about oh my gosh, well, what happens if this doesn't work? And how am I going to pay the bills? And I'm working 80 hours a week and I'm taking care of the kids and I'm doing all these things. And so we have all of these hormones that are out of control largely. And it gets us in this vicious cycle because guess what? When we're in those hormonal states, our memory systems in our brain stop working as well, right? Our cognitive systems stop working as well. So we don't perform as well, which worsens the vicious cycle because then it's more stress and more fear and more freeze and all of these things. So to answer to your question, I would say there's two things to take into account. And actually in Chinese medicine, I think Chinese medicine does a really good job of almost explaining how we can look at business from a holistic standpoint. So that Chinese medicine symbol, that yin yang symbol, that white and black circle, right? When we actually look at the symbology behind what that image means, it's looking at there's times where certain parts of our body are really, say, pushing and moving. And there's a lot of this energy, right? We call that yang. And then within the yang, we still want to find the rest, the pleasure, the joy, right? So that can be some of yin, especially that rest and restore. So my point is, in getting to the root of your question here, what do people do? One part is finding time, even in that push, even in that busyness, that yang of Chinese medicine, still finding if it's even 5 minutes a day to do some things that actually raise pleasure, which increases oxytocin. The point of oxytocin is to lower cortisol, get us out of fear, get us out of freeze, right? So cuddling, petting a dog, taking some deep breaths, intimacy with a partner, right? There's a lot of these different things in life that will actually bring oxytocin to our life, lower those stress hormones. And for women in particular, our hormones are so out of control, not in a bad way, but meaning there's just so much happening on a monthly cycle that oxytocin is the number one thing that's going to come in and regulate cortisol, regulate estrogen, regulate progesterone, regulate insulin and glucose, and help our body be able to do those things. So 5 minutes a day, get into your pleasure to help re-regulate yourself and get out of the vicious cycle. And then the second thing for that, for this getting out of the freeze, really becomes being clear and getting clear about business. Because what happens so commonly for entrepreneurs, and I was a victim of this as well in the beginning of my business world, is we are so overwhelmed by all the task. And sometimes it can just feel like putting out fires and we're just playing whack-a-mole with all the tasks versus actually getting clear, using metrics and setting up systems and setting up analytics. So when we become clear due to our systems that we've set up, we start to put together a plan that every day we can go into the day and say, what is actually the most number one important thing I do today? Mm-hmm. And when we can focus on that from a data-driven place, because we understand what is bringing us the most business, how are people coming into our business, how are they being informed about what we do, how are they purchasing, how are they retaining themselves as a customer. When we understand all of these things, we can find the missing hole and the biggest problem, focus all of our energy on that in any given day. And it takes out so much of the overwhelm because we're now not playing this whack-a-mole game of, I just got to work on all the things because it's not working.
So we are pushing and moving through a controlled system, but we need to have rest and pleasure and joy. I suppose not every kind of pleasure, but pleasure that is good for our health, for our 24 hours rhythm.
Yeah. And, pleasure is one of these things where it's like the pleasure I'm largely talking about here is pleasure that is increasing that oxytocin, right? Because that oxytocin is that regulatory hormone that so many people are so deprived of in their life. But pleasure can be also something that brings us into the present moment. So it's like, I have my espresso here, which just brings me so much joy in my day, right? And so how many times do we even rush in drinking our coffee and eating our food versus like, I'm going to take 5 minutes and I'm going to actually really enjoy the experience of this coffee, this food, whatever it is. So it's even those types of pleasure, because what's happening in those moments is our brain and our consciousness is coming into the present moment. And guess what happens? Fear goes down, cortisol goes down, we become more regulated, we think better, all of these things. So, I'm not talking about, like wine is delicious, so let's go out and have 3 bottles of wine, right? But have your glass of wine, enjoy it if that works well in your body, and really sink into that pleasure moment, and just don't do those kind of things, as the only way you're regulating pleasure.
Actually, you're going very deep into all those topics in your metrics method. If you can share a little bit more about those lifestyle, metabolic health, and other.
Yeah, the quadrants or the pillars of health. Lyme disease is definitely very interesting, right? Because Lyme disease is getting a lot of reputation as a tick-borne disease, but it's actually now there's limited studies that are showing that we can get this particular bacteria infection from mosquitoes. And there's even one study that looks at fleas, right? So we're learning more that this is more of an insect-borne type of thing. And the thing with infections, and Lyme disease at my Lyme doc is one of the many things that we are looking at. But when you're asking about, okay, well, what are the, kind of the root causes, the functional things we look at, we really have to understand that a lot of the common symptoms that people have when they have chronic disease and diseases that are just not healing, it could be things like chronic fatigue syndrome, headaches, fibromyalgia, pain of unknown origin, arthritis or other autoimmune conditions. There's a lot of different ways chronic disease can look. And so my Lyme doc, we do look at Lyme because it is a huge cause for a lot of people that gets misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. But really, we're looking at different quadrants of health. So we have our metabolic quadrant, which is really about all the things that build up the body. So this can be hormones and hormone health, like thyroid, adrenal, sex hormones, can be nutrients like our vitamins and minerals, essential fats, those sorts of things. So we have that category. So we can run tests to say, okay, is your body not building itself up? Is it not repairing itself? So that's one area. We have the lifestyle area, what we're eating, what we're drinking, how we're sleeping, are we moving, are we sitting too much, which sitting is totally new smoking. So we want to make sure that's dialed. We have the detox area, which is like, okay, what sort of mold toxins are we exposed to? There's a chemical called PFAS, known as the forever chemical, that's in our environment. It's human made. It can't be broken down in nature. So that one gets into our body. It's related to a lot of neuroinflammation, a lot of neurological diseases, cognitive dysfunction. We have other environmental toxins. So that's the detox. So we have metabolic, lifestyle, detox. And then the fourth is infections. And so looking at Lyme disease as a bacterial infection, that's what Lyme is. But other chronic hidden infections, hidden parasites, hidden viruses, other types of fungus and bacteria, for example. And so really the work we do for people is say, okay, you have chronic fatigue or you have some other type of disease or symptom that we don't know why. And you're just trying to manage. And all you've been told is like, yeah, maybe there's something a little bit out of normal or not. Maybe your thyroid's a little out of balance. But nothing you're doing is really making that fundamental difference. And so then we go through and lab test in these 4 areas. And we basically say, okay, for the uniqueness of a person with chronic fatigue syndrome, maybe one person is a combination of an adrenal problem, a toxin, and Lyme. And another person, it could be a thyroid problem, a nutrient deficiency, and perhaps a parasite, right? So it can look different as far as root causes. And our work is really to say, okay, what are the root causes? Find them, and then actually restore health through the individuality of knowing what the unique cause is for that person.
And you're covering Lyme disease in your book, your new book as well, don't you?
Yeah. So my new book, which comes out here on the 11th of March, is called It's Not in Your Mind. And that can be found on Amazon. It's actually already up for pre-order and all of that. So that one, we're going to go through Lyme, go through these toxins, go through other hidden infections. But we really talk about these 4 quadrants I'm talking about. So we go through, what do you need to be testing for from metabolic health? What is a good thyroid panel, for example, lifestyle wise, detox wise, like what are good tests? What are good treatments? How to even find a doctor that works for you? Because the biggest thing in finding a clinician, I find, is philosophical alignment, right? We really want to make sure it's an intimate relationship. We really want to make sure we have that good alignment with a clinician and with the way they work. And so all of that we cover in the book and more. Yeah.
Let's try to recap the business. What do you believe are the key components for success when it comes to running enterprise that you genuinely enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's clarity, commitment, and confidence, the 3 C's. And so clarity and commitment, those 2 come into play a lot in the beginning, because what I see sometimes is like, we have to be clear about where we're going. And initially that's clarity on what business we're running, who do we want to serve? And then it's becoming clear on, what do I need to do each day? What's the most important thing to become not overwhelmed and to enjoy the day, right? But clarity and commitment oftentimes go hand in hand, because once we are clear, we can commit. But sometimes people get in the entrepreneur world so lost, and at least in the States, what we call like shiny object syndrome, where it's like, oh, this is the next cool thing, or that's the next cool thing, right? So sometimes there's so many things that look cool that we also, before we're actually clear, we actually have to have a level of commitment of like, I'm going to commit to this thing, ignore the other shiny things that look cool that are coming my way, at least for now, and really, really commit to doing this thing. And then as we do that, then other versions of clarity come. Oh, I understand my customer a little more. I understand why they buy. I understand how to make my product better to serve them in the highest way possible, right? So we get clear with that. And then confidence is the thing that typically comes later, but I talk about that throughout the work I do with the entrepreneurs that I coach, because one of the biggest things with confidence is so many times it's so easy to be like, well, I'm not ready to get on stage yet. I'm not ready to do that webinar yet. I'm not confident yet, right? And so the way I frame confidence is, or the way I describe it is, confidence is that thing that we get by doing the thing we're not confident in enough times, right? So we do the thing enough times and then we get the confidence. And so I like to talk about that a lot and go deep into how we develop that, because sometimes when we're talking about freeze or fear, like we were talking about earlier, sometimes that's happening because we are just not confident and we're thinking that we have to be confident before we do that thing. No. First we do the thing, then we get the confidence. So those are kind of the 3 fundamental pillars I see in entrepreneurship. And then that's more from, say, that work and doing things. And then the other component of things is more the pleasure side, like we're talking about, and making sure that we're remembering. And I have the entrepreneurs I work with, and I only work with females, just because when we're talking about pleasure, it's a safer thing oftentimes for us to go in there when it's a female only scenario. And so with pleasure, one of the big things when we're talking about 90-day plans and goals and setting up our day-to-day process, we don't just talk about business. We don't just talk about what I'm going to work on. We actually talk about the 90-day pleasure goals. What are you going to be doing every single day to get into pleasure, to raise your oxytocin, to lower your cortisol, get you out of fear, and get your brain and your body actually working at the highest potential level that it can. For any of you guys out there that are dealing with chronic disease, that want help, I do have systems of working with people all over the world. So know that I have options for you no matter where you live. So you can definitely reach out to us at mylymedoc.com. We offer free 30-minute health evaluation calls with one of my team members to make sure that that's a good fit and our products are a good fit for you. So definitely find us over there at mylymedoc.com. And then the other thing from a business standpoint is when we're talking about clarity, right? One of the fundamental things that we need to put into place in order to move forward in our business, I have a free clarity quiz for you to go through to help you really analyze and say, how clear am I? Do I actually have the direction I need? Do I really know where I need to focus to get to where I want to get? So it starts helping you see areas in your business that, yeah, I'm real clear on this, or no, I'm spinning and I'm in fear and I'm in freeze because I actually don't know. So definitely check out that quiz because it can really help shine a light on the areas that you need to focus on. And that's designed to help get you out of this fear freeze type of response that's so common for entrepreneurs. Yeah, so for the business quiz, the easiest thing to go to is just my business website, which is FEMME, F-E-M-M-E. So FEMME meets, with an S, F-E-M-M-E, meetsfortune.com.
21st Century Entrepreneurship with Martin Piskarik.